Today on episode number 554 of the School of Podcasting, the media is poking fun at podcasting again. We have a couple of really cool Because of My Podcast stories. And even if you're not doing a local podcast, you might learn some things from today about promotion, connecting with your audience as we take a deep dive into doing a local podcast. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I am your very own personal podcast coach, Dave Jackson. Thanking you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, I bring my 20 plus years of understanding and teaching technology to you, and we work together to help you massage your message. We help you tackle that technology, face your fears, and flatten that learning curve, and not only get you podcasting, but get you podcasting right. And right now, there's a very popular tutorial on podcasting from 2012. And how mad would you be right now if you went out and bought a flat screen TV, and then to go along with that, you bought a DVD player, and you find out later, what? There's a thing called Blu-ray. Oh, I didn't know about that. What? I got to go back and change everything now? Yeah, you want up-to-date tutorials when you're learning about podcasting, and that does not mean learning from things that are 5 years old. Trust me on that. So our website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER, that's LISTENER, when you sign up, and that will save on either a single course or you can sign up for a monthly membership. And I always like to start off with a Because of My Podcast story. And today we are interviewing Lee from This Is Rammy. We're talking with Ken Blanchard from Upper Marlboro Podcast. We're talking with Chris from I Am Salt Lake. And we're talking with Jason from Local Podcasting. He's actually from onthego.fm. And two of them, Ken and Chris, have Because of My Podcast story. So check this out.
Because of my podcast, I met my future wife.
Nice.
She was a local comedian. She doesn't do stand-up really anymore, but she did a podcast, and we matched on Tinder because of podcasting. We both knew we loved podcasting. I started dating her about a year and a half ago, and now we're engaged to be married, and she co-hosts the podcast with me. And
nice.
And it's all because of my podcast.
So the surprise of Black Man with a Gun after the 500th episode has messed me up. What happened was I sent out a press release and got a call from television, from the Outdoor Channel and the Sportsman's Channel, and they would want to have me as a possible new host for their show. So I had to go run out to Vegas and meet with some folks this week because of my podcast, that I'm probably going to be moving up to television here shortly.
Nice. That would be cool.
Yeah, and I totally thought, nobody cares. I just hadn't marketed to the right people yet. So that was all. You got to be careful of that.
Yeah, well, we'll back up a second. What was in this magic press release?
All I did was tell people that I've been operating for 9 years. I've been in this thing. I have X amount of downloads a week. And my audience is really, really faithful. Even the numbers don't mean much because it's the people that I have in this group. And I started quoting and talking about the celebrities that have been on my show that nobody had even known. The big folks kind of draw to it. That if you have like the president of the National Rifle Association, and you might have Lee Ermey from Full Metal Jacket, and a whole bunch of like pro-gun people that they all know me. So they call me and hey, I'm promoting this thing. Can I be on your show? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I didn't promote that as well as I could. So after I dropped all these names, they were like, hey, this guy might be somebody. So that kind of changed things.
There you go. Some really cool stories on how people are benefiting from podcasting. And in the news, if you're a fan of the Family Guy, you know I'm going to talk about this. And both Jimmy Fallon and now the Family Guy are kind of painting the picture that podcasting is done by people who don't know that they're not talented, talk about really weird things. Well, here's just a clip from the Family Guy.
Hey, what's up with the menus at the Cheesecake Factory? Why they gotta be so big?
Yeah, and why does their menu have ads? I go there for dinner, not to shop for appliances.
Hey, you know what, guys? This right here, this rambling, boring conversation containing already made before observations, This could be a podcast.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Really? A podcast? Don't you have to be some sort of whiz kid to do those?
Definitely not. Anyone with a computer can make one.
Well, that's it. We're anyone. Let's do a podcast from right here in the booth. Who's in?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.
Is it happening? Are we doing it now?
Awesome.
Awesome. Yes. Now, it is awesome because the one thing that I always like to point out the positive here is they don't have to explain what a podcast is. They are assuming that the general public is already understanding what a podcast is. So, yes, we're getting painted as three guys in a basement talking about whatever. But nonetheless, let's look at the bright side. They don't have to explain what a podcast is. Now, before we get to the local podcasting discussion, I do want to mention I am going to be at PodFest. Actually, as you're listening to this, I'm probably freaking out, packing some bags, starting to fret about getting on a plane the next day to go down to Orlando, Florida. If you're in Orlando, come on, you got to go. Listen what's going to happen all week. Number one, phenomenal networking options, great sessions. Some guy named Dave Jackson is the closing keynote. The screening, the first ever screening of The Messengers, emceed by some guy named Dave Jackson, which would be great fun. I'm really, really, really looking forward to that. And it's just a great time. And bring the kids, let them go see the mouse while you go play with podcasting. For more information, go to podfest.us. Now, let's start talking about local podcasting. We're normally thinking about podcasting to the world. This is the direct opposite. This is talking about your local town. I started off learning about local podcasting by interviewing Jason Norris from onthego.fm, who does a show called Podcast Local. And then later, I asked you if you did a local show or if you know anybody like that. And a few of you responded. That was great. I also heard from my friend Ken Blanchard that he had started one. So Ken was on episode 3, and you can find him at blackmanwithagun.com. And his podcast is called Upper Marlboro Podcast. Chris Hollingsworth does I Am Salt Lake, and you can find him at iamsaltlake.com. And then Lee Ball across the pond does This Is Rammy about Ramsbottom in the UK. So here's Jason talking about, first things first, you have to know who your audience is.
So people like Mark with his Beyond Bourbon Street and people like Lou Mangello, they are talking about their city, but their primary audience is not necessarily living in that city or that area, that place. They're from somewhere else. And in some ways, it's almost like a tourist podcast, but it's still talking about the local area. But you get someone like Chris Holyfield, who does I Am Salt Lake, and Bo York from Let's Talk Jackson. What they're doing, Jackson, Mississippi, what they are doing is focusing on their own community. And to me, that's what I started this whole Podcast Local thing about, was to look at what you could do with your skills as a podcaster to talk to your community about your community, to potentially bring your community together, to build up your community. I mean, even for people who do podcasts about various topical niches, there's that idea that you're creating community. But what if you were to take that power of creating community and focus it literally on the community where you live, and hopefully even make where you live a better place to live?
Lee from This Is Rammy also found that people were coming to his town because of his podcast.
People listening to the show before moving here and checking out the website. So yeah, there's a few people that are moving to Ramsbottom soon, and they'll put comments on Facebook and things. And I'm keen to try and find out how they found things moving here and finding houses. Parking is quite a big issue around here because it's quite a small old town. So there's not a great deal of parking. And because it's so far outside of the biggest city, which is Manchester, it's you tend to get a lot of people commuting, so they'll have one or two cars. So yeah, it'd be interesting to find their take with fresh eyes and ears, really.
Mark Bologna wanted his audience to be someone who did not live in New Orleans. Chris Holyfield of I Am Salt Lake, that's his audience. His audience and his topics, his ideas for whatever he's going to do, it's the people of Salt Lake City.
And of course, another very important question that you need to ask is, why are you starting this podcast? Here's Ken Blanchard.
Something that you said probably a year ago, and I thought, let me try it. I'm I've been podcasting for 9 years, and I've probably had 8 shows that have come and gone. So I'm not afraid to try. And I thought, what happened if I could successfully get a podcast right in my neighborhood and become almost the mayor of this place without knowing it? People would know who I am by my voice, and everybody would be a little bit friendlier and nicer, and daisies would bloom and all that kind of good stuff. So I thought, let me try it. Let me give it a shot.
Being new to the area, I would say, and wanting to get exposure myself to the local people, local businesses, local groups. In all honesty, the selfish side of it was that I had put a lot of time, effort, and money into moving to this area. We'd moved from an area which was pretty cheap to live, not the best place, and I wanted to keep Ramsbottom the reason, like as the area the reason that we moved here for. So keeping the property prices good.
Here's how Chris from IamSaltLake.com got started.
And I was helping my ex-wife. She would sell her handmade clothing at the farmers markets. And it just hit me one day. And I said, why don't I interview these people? You know, the people that are making stuff, that are doing all this stuff in Salt Lake. You know, a lot of times we just go and buy stuff from them, but we don't know their stories. We don't know what inspired them to create their products or their businesses. And I knew that I wanted to do an in-person podcast, and it just seemed like the perfect fit for that.
Then it was a matter of choosing your format.
Yeah, the sections part of things, that kind of just grew naturally, because at the beginning I had very little content outside of the interviews. So it was just like, right, okay, well, I'll basically read the newspaper. And so I just pulled them out, little articles and things like that. And yeah, it naturally turned into sections, which is now a local news section, an events section, the local football team scores, and then some shout outs. So like community engagement type things. And that's kind of how it's stuck since probably a few months in now.
Lately, since I brought on my fiance as a co-host about a year ago, we just kind of sit and talk about our life a little bit. And we've actually found that people are very receptive of that because they want to get to know who is Chris and Chrissy. So we kind of introduce the show, who's going to be on the show, who we interviewed, maybe, mention maybe a new restaurant we tried or something we did, and then just jump right into the interview.
Well, okay. Fort Worth, for instance, 800,000 people. Okay. It's plenty big enough. And it's got a very rich, colorful history, Fort Worth does. And so if you just started talking about things like the stockyards, and these are things that, well, for instance, when the podcast movement came in 2015, I think it was, right? When they came down, they were looking at things that, what is it about Fort Worth that's interesting? And stockyards, of course, is one of those. So if you started telling stories about the stockyards, for one, yes, outsiders to your community are going to possibly be interested. But if you can find things about your community that even the people who live there don't really know the history of, they don't know why it's called a certain thing, they don't know why this place is built or what is this thing, then that's where you can go and you can start to uncover some history, some stories, and tell stories about those places.
As always, your podcast is a recipe. You can change it any way you want. So we kind of heard how Chris and Lee just kind of evolved into their format. In some cases, you may actually start a podcast and find out later you want to switch the whole thing. Here's Ken Blanchard.
No, what happens is for everything that I do, and you said it too, once you throw it on a wall, you got to take notes of what actually works and what doesn't. What I found out, though, is that the content, having a niche thing is still important, but you got to find your audience almost before you do your niche. And in doing this, I was sitting watching my son, who's a rising mixed martial artist, and he was in his gym with like 1,000 people, and everybody was in there was fighting. There was even little babies like flipping around in there, and they were in their own little world. They just were so happy to punch each other in the face. And I thought, what a weird bunch of people. And they're all happy and they'll slug it out. And in the next 2 minutes, they're hugging like good match. And I thought, this is a community waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So I walked over to the owner of the gym and I said, do you guys have a podcast? And he says, no. I said, do you want one? He says, I always wanted to, but it's a little technical for me. I got to run this gym and train these guys. And I thought, this is my niche right here. I'm coming back here next Tuesday, and I'm going to probably rebrand the old show that I started with my son, and it'll be a father and son mixed martial art thing. We're going to do it out of that boxing gym and get all those people, and that probably is going to take over from what Marlboro Podcast could have been.
Yeah, it's you figure all those people in there got a story, and
all of them.
Yeah. So what was it like starting a new local podcast? Here's Chris from I Am Salt Lake.
My ex-wife thought it was a great idea. I pitched the idea to a few people and they kind of thought, well, that's going to be a tough market because, you're limiting yourself to just a small demographic. And I was like, oh, I don't care. I don't care if only, 10 people listen to it. This seems like a lot of fun. And it just took off. It's been a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, but it's kind of created its own thing.
And whether this is your first podcast or your second or third, remember there are still only 24 hours in the day. And when you start adding things like investigating old historic stories that you want to go deep in, that's going to take some time.
So when I first started it, I was actually doing 2 episodes a week. Just because I thought, well, that's how I'm going to make my podcast grow is, the more episodes I do and the more podcasts that I produce and they're sharing it to their audiences. And I got a little burned out of that. And at that same time, I was going through a divorce and I was trying to get back in the dating scene and all of that. So I cut back to 1 episode a week, but it's been a fun journey, 265 episodes.
So I went out and started doing some history on the town, and there's a lot of stuff here that we kind of drive by. This town was around during the Star Spangled Banner, and it was that little bit of history stuff like that that I thought maybe somebody will care. And I'm not have given up on it yet. We're on like episode number 3 with it, and life kind of got in my way, so I couldn't neglect the other 2 podcasts that I'm doing, and that's what slowed up on this one. But the first chance I get, I'm going to crank out probably at least 4 or 5 and have them ready for next month.
These podcasts often start to resemble like a small local newspaper. You have things like business news and interviews, reviews, entertainment news, sports, and you think the easiest part of that would be talking to business owners who might want more exposure for their business, but that is not always the case. Here's Chris from I Am Salt Lake.
Well, exactly. I thought I would just walk into people's businesses and they would be like, oh yeah, let's talk. And then I quickly realized people didn't want that. They wanted to come to you. And, you quickly even learn how to do a proper interview. You're like, well, I can't interview somebody during business hours because they're constantly getting interrupted by customers. So I had to kind of teach myself the interviewing process and how to even conduct an interview and the importance of taking notes and all of that. I mean, I had to teach myself all of that. And it's been really interesting. There's been, some mistakes in the beginning, things I learned. It was probably about my 3rd interview that I did. I remember how tough it was to even pull answers out of these. It was for a local food truck, and it was about 8 to 10 minutes into the interview, and I had nothing else to talk about, and I had a little notepad with probably 15 questions, and I felt, well, this is enough. This is enough questions, and obviously it wasn't. So since then, I still to this day I have tons of pages of notes, even though I rarely even refer to them, just because, as the more interviews you do, the better you get.
Along with the history, I was going to also grab 1 business per show. And through that would kind of be a teaser and a plus for them to promote it. And the first person I went to was Marlboro Tire. It's a company that I get my stuff serviced to, all my car stuff. And it took forever. As soon as you say, I got a podcast or I'm doing some marketing. The people who were telling you 300 stories while you're waiting for your car all shut up. And they point you to this guy who's like, you never even seen before. And he's like the marketing guy. And he's never around and takes forever for him to show up. And he finally talks to you. And he tells you how hard it is to podcast and how hard it is to be an SEO. And it's like, no, you're not the guy I wanted. I wanted the old dude who was talking to me about the story, about how the store got started. That's what I wanted to know. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's Mike. But Mike told me to talk to you. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I'm still working that out. I have to figure it out. I have to not tell anybody on some things. I'm going to have to just say, hey, I record. You mind if I record this little story that you told me? And then the bigger you go, I think people just shut down. They get kind of afraid that they're not saying the right thing, or this thing might be on National Geographic tomorrow. And even though this is a recording and it's audio, that they're not dressed for it. So you don't know.
The only difficulty I had was because it was in my spare time, I was trying to get a lot more evening recordings and things like that, and try and get more evening interviews, because I'd be working all day, and that's not so easy with some of the businesses. So I was recording some in my lunch hour at work, just over the phone, plugged into my microphone, just booked out a meeting room and did a few like that. And eventually I got to the point where people started to know who I was, and I had more of a system of, if they want an in-person interview, then I'll go around to their house, or they can come to me. And if they can't accommodate like an evening, then I would do it at the weekend, and I'll just turn up at their shop or business or whatever. And a lot of people they do quite appreciate the exposure that they get, because some people don't know what a podcast is, but they still like to have the thought that they are on one and they're getting their name out.
I have a day job, and so it makes it really difficult to do a lot of stuff like that during the day. Yeah. When a lot of people, and that's actually been one of the most frustrating things as well, is a lot of people, especially with business, they're only willing to talk to you, between business hours. And you're like, well, I'll meet you, I'm able to sit down with you in the evening. And even though it's free advertising, they're not quite as receptive.
I don't know if they thought I was going to charge for the interview, which I don't. But they kind of just said it's not really for them. So I went back and forth and I explained what the podcast system was, and all about what the whole purpose of it was, and that I try and give them exposure. And it just wasn't for them. And the second one I just have was she was just too busy.
One strategy is to get involved with the local government. Here's Lee from This Is Rammy.
Yeah, there's a local Ramsbottom business group. I had the chair of that interviewed fairly early on in the podcast. But in it'll probably be a month, about 3 weeks from now, I'm going to be meeting someone from Bury Council. So they are like the local authority for Ramsbottom and the surrounding areas. And they basically reached out to me and they said, we've read you, we've seen your website, we like what you do. Do you want to come and have a meeting in the local civic hall? So I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I've booked the day off work and I'm going to go and speak with someone there. I think it's going to be more about promoting the things that they do in the civic hall. But as far as I'm concerned, it's all content for the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here in Salt Lake, we have what's called the Downtown Alliance, and they kind of, they're helping kind of mold, downtown Salt Lake City. And I've chatted with them through email, but we've never really talked face to face. They know who I am. I know who they are, but it's just kind of been one of those things that hasn't happened. I actually was trying to get one of the mayors, this was a couple years ago, to come on the podcast, but there were so many hoops that we had to jump through, and the correspondence just kind of stopped.
And I've always been dying to test this. I really thought a local podcast might be easier to get sponsors. I live in Akron, Ohio, and if you come to Akron, I'm taking you to Luigi's Pizza. It's an Akron institution, and I really thought it'd be easy to get all the local businesses that we've heard about to advertise on the show. Jason from onthego.fm.
It's not just seeking out money, but sometimes trade outs. So, hey, can we have a corner of this coffee shop or cafe or whatever? Can we use this? we'll talk about where we are for you, so benefit for you. But then we get the space where we can actually interview some other people and have a conversation and get the ambience, the sounds of your community in there as well.
But as the podcast has grown, I started to find the profit in it elsewhere. So not so much monetary. I was just enjoying doing the podcast, speaking to people, finding out more about their businesses. I still am open to, to podcast episode sponsors. I still do have a media pack if somebody wants to advertise on the show. And I think the benefit of that Ramsbottom is quite individual in that they're all local small businesses is also the detriment to the advertising side of things, because they don't have a lot of money and they tend to spend all their money on the shop.
So I struggled a little bit just because local mom and pop places don't really have the money to pay you. I mean, I would reach out to people and just, say, hey, can you help with the bare minimum of just even help pay for my website? And people were like, oh, well, I don't know. And so it was actually really tough. I would do some trade sponsors. So that was really nice where, I would trade products, but it was really tough. There have been a couple of opportunities. One opportunity, it was actually happened about 2 summers ago. I don't know if you have CenturyLink out where you're at there. They were unrolling a new internet service here in Salt Lake, the faster service, kind of like Google Fiber. And they contacted me. And at first I was like, well, I only want to deal with local people. And then they explained to me what they were doing. They're like, hey, we have this new internet service in Salt Lake City, and we want you to be on the commercial of it. And so that was a really, really cool opportunity that kind of came my way and helped fund a lot of things that I was doing. But up until recently I got a sponsor with a barbershop that has been amazing to work with, and they've helped fund a lot of things. But it's actually a lot tougher with the local market that I've found out to get a sponsor.
So Lee from This Is Rammy thought to himself, what would Glenn do?
Although the thing that we have a local, not a leaflet, like a little book comes through the doors with lots of, it's basically just an advertising book, and it's got like window cleaners, door sellers and things like that. And it's on like one of the very top list of my things. And what I'm going to do is pull out all of the local people in there, because they are already paying for advertisement. And there's already a pricing in the book that says if you want a full page ad, it's like £150 if you want this and the other. So I can start with the big companies and just send out a message and say, hey, if you want to sponsor an episode, it'd be great. I'd love to come and talk to you.
That's right. Glenn the Geek It, baby. Find that magazine and go to town. That's awesome.
There is a magazine. That's the thing. There's a magazine just around the corner that's printed. And tomorrow I'm going to either just turn up or send an email. Tomorrow might be a bit difficult because I've got the mother-in-law coming around. But I'm gonna go in and try and set up some kind of definitely Glenn the Geek, that thing.
Yeah. That's right. Glenn the Geek from horseradionetwork.com. If you want to hear about that strategy, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/Glenn. That's GLENN and the number 1. So what are these people doing to promote their show? And the one thing I was kind of surprised on, but not really, when you're first starting out, maybe there's no budget for this. But my advice to all of them was, and they're all going to be doing this, is leaving some sort of either business card or getting a sticker for the window or a flyer for the window that says this business was featured on, and then the name of their show. I know Lee is going to have little like table tents made to be at the cashier's kind of spot so people can see that when they're checking out. And so all sorts of ways to leave that. And the reason I say that is I live in Akron, Ohio. The bigger city is Cleveland. It's about an hour north. And we have a local ice cream place that's just really phenomenal. And the big TV station from Cleveland came down to do a story on that, and they put a sticker in their window that said, as featured on PM Magazine. And we're all like, ooh, PM Magazine, Channel 5. But nonetheless, it was branding to show, for the business that, hey, we've been featured on I Am Salt Lake, This is Rami, et cetera, et cetera. And for the podcaster, it's then, hey, this must be some cool thing because, well, they're featuring local people. So it's a win-win for both. But that doesn't mean that the boys have not been out promoting their show. In fact, I think Lee gets some sort of gold star for the most creative way of promoting your show.
Okay, so each year in Ramsbottom, there is a giant duck race, and it's supposed to be for like businesses and things like that. I mean, I'm not really a business, but
not yet.
Well, yeah, not yet, but there isn't really any restriction other than just paying. I think it was £10 for the duck, and so everybody. I think there was about a good 50, 60 last year, and everybody designs them. There's like awards for best dressed duck and things like that. So I thought,
nice.
That's I'd love to get involved with that. It looks like a bit of fun, and so I did that. I got a wager going with a local cafe that I'd go in quite a lot, and I said, if your duck beats mine, then you can have a free advertisement. If mine duck beats yours, then I want a free breakfast. So we did that on Twitter. So it was all public and stuff. And it's good fun. It's what you get in local small towns in England.
Lee had also found some ways of automating getting content for his show.
So for the articles and things like that, I have a lot of the local newspapers, RSS feeds hooked into Hootsuite. And what will happen is every time they update, it'll just post an article, and if people start to respond to that article quite a lot, they'll like it and things, and comment on it. I'll see the comments because it posts as me, so it's not like a retweet or anything. And then I usually have a good idea of what's popular, so I'll get that out for the events section of the podcast. But for that's for the news sections of the podcast. For the actual events section, I've got a lot of the individual businesses' Facebook pages hooked into a plugin called WordPress Events or something like that. And it essentially feeds in all of pulls in the events from Facebook, and it just adds them into the events calendar.
And speaking of digging up content, Chris found a really interesting story in Salt Lake.
Well, it was actually one of my recent interviews. I was contacted by a guy that was inherited an adult sex doll company.
And that's all we're going to play of that one. But let's go back to some tips if you're thinking of starting a local podcast.
Network, get out in your local community and get to know everybody. Introduce yourself to everybody. That's definitely something I could have done more of in the very beginning, is go to all the events that you could go to. If it's a Friday night and there's a band playing, go check them out, introduce yourself, give them a card, tell them what you're doing. Because, that's the best part about doing a local podcast is we have access to all of our listeners right outside our front door.
Yep.
Versus, say, even your podcast, it's probably a little tougher to just walk outside your front door and tell everybody about it because they might not be interested. Exactly. However, with a local podcast, I'm always sparking up conversations with people, telling them about it, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds incredible. How can I find out more about it?" So I think networking is very important.
You kind of have to barge your way into it a little bit and get yourself involved. So if you don't throw yourself out there, you're not really going to experience Ramsbottom as you could. So you throw yourself out there and then you start to make so many contacts, and it's just, it really does change the way you look at the community.
And speaking of engaging in the community, Chris has a great tip.
Is I was able to do live shows. I've done a bunch of live shows with the podcast, and that has been probably one of the most incredible experiences to get to meet your listeners by doing a live podcast recording, kind of very David Letterman-ish, where, people come out, they have a seat, they, grab a seat in the club and then watch me interview about, 3 or 4 different people that evening. And that's been a really cool experience to do with the podcast.
Now, how do you pull that off? Is there a PA system so they can hear you then, or?
Well, so when I was first approached by this, there was a club here in Salt Lake. They're not doing it anymore, but the guy actually set it up for this specific reason to do live podcasts. And at this time, I've never even really been to a live podcast because it's not like they're happening all the time here like they are in cities like LA. And so I didn't really know how they did it. And I didn't even know, well, how would I do a live podcast? Would somebody really want to sit and listen to me interview one person for an hour? I would think most people would get bored of it. So I chatted with a few different podcast friends that I had, and it kind of came down to a few recommendations of having, 3 or 4 different people, even preferably people that have been on the podcast before. So, they're comfortable with the microphone, they're comfortable with their speaking, and chat with them 10 or 15 minutes, kind of that David Letterman-ish, where you bring them out, sit them on a couch, very relaxed atmosphere, and bring them out one at a time, eventually have all 3 or 4 people out, kind of start, you have your roundtable conversation. And typically I would even ask lighthearted questions, nothing serious, like, oh, how would you survive a zombie apocalypse? Or how would you, what did you do on your 21st birthday? And so when you bring comedians in on that, maybe, former comedian people that I had on the podcast, it really, brought some laughs to the audience. But then at the very end, I was able to open it up to audience questions. And when you have, my first live show I ever did, I had probably 180, 200 people there. And so it was just an incredible experience. And so you get all those people there. They have questions for me, whether it's regarding the podcast or regarding the show that night. I mean, just that energy from the people. So yeah, they have the PA set there. The guy who did it, he was able to record it. So I was able to release it as a podcast. And I mean, that was I've probably done about 6 to 8 different live shows, and they've all been a little bit different. Sometimes, when I've done them in other locations, I just plug my H6 into the PA system, and that records it that way. But those have been probably that's actually, even to back up to your question of somebody wanting to do a local podcast, is find ways to do live shows in your community.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if you had 200 people in a room and they go to work next day and somebody says, well, what'd you do last night? They said, oh, I went down to the beer mug and there's some guy doing a live podcast and it was cool. And they were talking to so-and-so. Instantly, you've got a bunch of people that are spreading the news about your show. And,
Exactly. Well, they're posting pictures on Facebook, on Instagram, on Snapchat, all of that. And you're just like, wow. I mean, this is like free advertising for it.
And especially if you can get those people into the recording, that is gold, my friend. It's an old trick I did back when I was a musician, and websites weren't that common, is I would go out with my digital camera. This is before phones. And I would take pictures of the audience and put them, literally I would go home from the gig and put them on our website. So the next day they could wake up and see themselves on our website. And they would then tell all their friends, look at me, I'm on the internet. Cause back then that was a big deal. And so if you can get your audience into the recording, they will then say, they'll go and listen, if nothing else, just to hear themselves. Cause underneath it all, we're all a little veins.
If you want to start something that's really, really niche, put your heart into it and don't worry about it. Just slow cook it. Don't rush it. Don't be like me. Just wait and then work it. Work your thing. Go to the meetings, go to the town meetings, go to whatever the audience is. Once I do that, I know I'll get more people. Don't have your expectations that you're going to be, Joe Rogan, UFC guy with like 3-hour shows and millions of people. That's not your audience. So go with realistic expectations and just work your passion.
If you have any thoughts of doing a local podcast, just get out and try to do it. My first thought was everybody's going to judge me on my equipment. especially when you're meeting people in person. I was always worried I didn't have top of the line equipment, but I just went out and did it. I didn't worry what people said. Cause it's a lot different when people are meeting you in person versus, just doing something over the internet, like a lot of podcasters do. You have to be yourself, because if you're not, it just doesn't work out very well. And so you have to, don't be afraid to share yourself. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to just put yourself out there. And the people that don't like you, they're going to go one way. And the people that do, they're going to be your biggest fans.
Anybody that's starting any kind of podcast, we're always worried about negative comments and that people aren't going to like it. So I asked Chris, have you gotten any negative comments?
No, I mean, not really, no.
And what about Lee?
Surprisingly, yeah, it was one person, and this was off the back of a survey. So every year I put out a survey and I just essentially say, it's a few questions, about 8 questions, and things like, have you ever listened to a podcast before This Is Rami? Do you listen to the podcast? Do you subscribe? Do you read the articles? Things like that. And yeah, one person replied in this like free text box and said, it was, well, I guess it was quite nasty, but I wasn't that bothered. It was along the lines of, why do you hide behind your keyboard when you clearly are only interviewing businesses and people who are your friends or something like that? And I think it was a local business that I possibly gave not the best review in the world, which is, I wasn't nasty in the interview. I said it was great, but I just thought they were a bit expensive, which they were. It was like £15 for a pizza or something like that. And that's all assumptions because I don't know exactly who it was. But, I thought I dealt with it quite well, because I basically took that response and posted it in a local Facebook group and said, I do my best, and I sometimes get comments like this. And the whole point of that was that even though it didn't bother me, I thought people would defend me. And they did. And it was great. Everybody said that, keep going, ignore this. We really love what you do. So that kind of helped me to get over now.
We heard Chris at the beginning of the show say how he basically swapped sponsorship for a Zoom H6 recorder, which is really nice. What did Chris start off with?
The first couple of episodes were recorded on an iPhone, just because I didn't even know if I wanted to do a podcast. I was like, okay, I'll try this, but is this something I want to spend a lot of money on?
Nice.
Do I really want to go out and spend, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000? So I said, I'll do it on my iPhone. And I quickly realized that that's not the best way to do it. And actually, I found your podcast, School of Podcasting, and I started listening to that about episode 3 and 4. And you recommended, the ATR 2100 mic. So I plugged that into my laptop. And
when you said I did it with your phone, elaborate. How did you actually do that?
So I don't even remember what it was, but those adapter microphones that you used to be able to plug into the iPhone.
Yeah. Okay.
So I had one of those, and I just recorded the interview, into the audio with the little record button on there. And then I took the audio from that and edited into Audacity.
I would say if anybody has even the smallest thought that they could do it, just go out and do it, because the worst that's going to happen is you'll put out a podcast that maybe, a few people listen to, but you're going to either get experience from just going out and learning about your local town, but you'll also get experience from just having exposure to a lot of people as well. And so I've made a lot of connections from the podcast. And early on, I think I was thinking, I wouldn't mind if it was 20 people that listened to the podcast each week. I thought that'd be great. And the first episode came out, and I think it was about 40 or 50 people. I thought, well, I haven't really advertised this. Nobody knows it. I'm not entirely sure where they came from. And, it's grown and grown, and there's a few hundred people listen each week now, which is, it's good. It's a fair number of people. Sometimes I get the odd spike here and there, but it's fun.
Well, let's wrap this up with some tips from the guy that started it all, Jason Norris. Of course, you can find him at onthego.fm, and the show he does is all about podcasting local, and it's called Podcast Local.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a guide that I put together, and these were more just like little sparks of ideas. But if you were to create a local podcast and you focused on these areas or pick 2 or 3, that I think it would help you. And one of them would be people and focusing on the people of your community. In fact, I did not do that to start with in Fort Worth. And looking back on it, I think that would have been better. What I did is my wife and I would take our kids somewhere and we would record some of the adventures that we were going on, whether it was to the stockyards or, to the local farmers market and things like that. That was great, but it's really, ultimately, it's going to be people that are going to be talking about what you're doing. And then when you get more people involved in the show, then that's when the whole word of mouth kicks in. So I think if you were going to start a podcast, I would think about starting with people, especially if you do like people and you like talking to people. If you don't, or you're nervous about that, well, then you can go more historical. I think you can tell stories of every community has an origin story. You could at least tell that. How did your community come to be? And then if you can, tell how your community changed over the course of time. Look at some big events and then maybe create a series there that it's like the history of whatever your city is, your state, your community, your parish, wherever it is you happen to live. And then people, well, a good way of remembering it is people, places, and things. Look at people, look at places that are unique to your area, and then various things that are there too.
At the beginning of this discussion, we heard Ken Blanchard say,
and I thought, what happened if I could successfully get a podcast right in my neighborhood and become almost the mayor of this place without knowing it? People would know who I am by my voice. And
it's one of those things that I think, I mean, you'll probably know more than me, but it's either you have to be a massive podcaster to bump into people that know you, or a really small local podcaster and then bump into people that know you, because you kind of get the benefits that you get from being this massive, the Dave Jackson, for example, without actually being the Dave Jackson. You're a local celebrity, and it's nice to go out and not try and get things for free, because you probably could try and do that, but it's nice to go out and know that the community that you live in is something that you bring into other people, and it's a little bit of pleasure for them. So I would say definitely do it, and but beforehand, try and avoid listening to too many webinars about how you can make thousands and thousands of dollars from a podcast.
Have you been recognized when you've been out and about?
Yeah. I just got my hair cut with my son, and someone came over and said, "Are you Lee?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Do you do This Is Rami?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, great." I listened to the show. I was like, "This is weird." How, I know people listen to the show, but I wouldn't necessarily expect to bump into somebody that listens to the show. But, it does happen. And I've also bumped into people just while I'm walking around and things like that. And yeah, it's good. It's nice.
I'm going to say, how's that make you feel?
Well, no one's punched me in the face yet. So it makes me feel all right. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Does it give you a little jolt? It's like, all right, I'm going to, people are actually listening. I think I'll keep doing this. Yeah,
absolutely. It has both effects. On the one hand, it makes me go, "Oh, great, people are listening." And then on the other hand, go, "Oh, no, people are listening."
There you go. Good way to end that. That is Lee from thisisrami.co.uk, Chris from iamsaltlake.com, Ken from uppermarlboro.com or blackmanwithagun.com, and Jason from onthego.fm doing the podcast local show now. Chris has over 200 shows. Lee is up to 88. Ken is right out of the gate at 4, and Jason is doing a podcast about local podcasters. Well, there's not that many, so he's got 9. And like you said, there is a guide if you're thinking of starting that. He has one on his website at onthego.fm. But some things here that apply no matter what podcast it is. Number one, get involved in your community, whether it's a duck race or a live show or whatever it is, you have to go to your community. That's number one. We're still going to have to train some people if you're trying to do some advertising. Not everybody knows what the heck a podcast is. That's kind of, expected in some cases. You don't need a ton of equipment. I always tell people you can start a podcast for the price of an Xbox, and Chris started with his iPhone. Getting a local sponsor, I thought that was going to be a lot easier, and apparently it's not. Now, again, we have a sample here of 4 people. My favorite 2 words out of this whole episode was Lee. He said, "It's fun." And Lee is having fun with his wife. His wife is really into Instagram, so they will kind of go out, and while Lee is getting content for his show, she's getting content for Instagram. And likewise, Chris's fiance is going out with him to these different places to review. It's a lot of fun. And we also learned, and this was no surprise, that politicians are slow and kind of a pain in the butt to work with. But if you keep knocking on it, apparently you can get through that door. So that is really kind of the same for everyone. And I liked Lee's tips of having different RSS feeds. I've talked about that. Actually, I have a course on that at the School of Podcasting on how you can have, in my example, I show how you can have new books from Amazon go into your RSS reader so you have those show up. So we'll have links to this out in the show notes at schoolofpodcasting.com/554. And that is going to do it for this episode. I want to make a mention here. If you happen to be female and you're like, hey, Dave never talks to females, I've got a line on a couple that I'll be interviewing some females in the future, as well as talking about whatever the heck you want to talk about. Always looking for insights into what you'd like to hear. And want to mention again, I'm going to be in Orlando on next week, the 23rd through the 25th. And if you're going to be there as well, I'm going to be primarily at the Libsyn booth, but I want to make sure that you know that I put my shoes on one at a time. I put my pants on. And if you're nervous about coming up and saying, hey, Dave, whatever you want to say to me, please know that I am dying to meet you. I hate to hear when somebody says, well, I was going to say hi, but I don't know. I didn't want to bug you. And I didn't know, please come bug me. Say hello. I'm dying to meet you because really we talked about that today, how they went through and, they went out into they have the one thing that we don't. When they open up the door, their target audience is in front of them. And I rarely get in front of my target audience. And so I'm dying to talk to you. So please do not hesitate to come by and say hi. And I look forward to meeting all of you and having a good time in Orlando. And I might even get a little sun. Who knows? That could be crazy. So we'll see you again next week. I'll have my PodFest observations and my Messenger's observations and probably absolutely no voice left. That should be fun. I'll probably sound like Barry White next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Until next week, class is dismissed. Take care and God bless.
This could be a podcast.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Really? A podcast? Don't you have to be some sort of whiz kid to do those?
Definitely not. Anyone with a computer can make one.
Well, that's it.
You're anyone. You have a computer. Use the coupon code LISTENER when you sign up and save on a single course or a monthly or yearly membership.